What happens when a wife's reset weekend turns into the smoking gun of her own destruction? Can a marriage survive when every secret, every lie, and every swipe is exposed in front of family, friends, and colleagues, all while she's still telling herself she's done nothing wrong? The moment the process server handed me divorce papers at my own nonprofit's donor brunch, I finally realized you can't gaslight the truth forever. The moment I told Rowan I needed to visit my mother to reset our marriage, I could see the hurt flash across his face. But I'd practiced this speech in the mirror 3 times that morning, perfecting the right balance of vulnerability and determination. "I just need some space to think, honey," I said, placing my hand on his arm as he sat at our kitchen island, coffee growing cold. "Mom's been asking me to visit anyway, and I think a weekend away might help us both gain some perspective." Rowan Gable, my husband of 8 years, looked up from his laptop where he'd been editing wedding photos from last weekend's ceremony. At 36, he still had that gentle, observant quality that had first attracted me to him. His dark hair was slightly messy from running his fingers through it while working, and his hazel eyes searched my face with that photographer's attention to detail that sometimes made me uncomfortable. "Are we really that bad, Lavinia?" he asked quietly. "I mean, I know things have been a little strained lately, but I thought we were working through it." I felt a tiny stab of guilt but pushed it down. This wasn't about being bad or good. This was about the fact that I was 33 years old and felt like I was sleepwalking through my life. My marriage had become predictable, comfortable in the worst way. Rowan was a good man, too good maybe. He never surprised me anymore, never made my pulse race. When was the last time he'd even noticed when I wore something new? "It's not about us being bad," I said, softening my voice. "It's about us being stuck. Don't you feel it too, like we're just going through the motions?" Rowan closed his laptop and turned to face me fully. "I guess I've been so focused on building the business that maybe I haven't been as present as I should be, but running away to your mum's house doesn't seem like the solution." "I'm not running away," I said, allowing a slight edge to creep into my voice. "I'm being proactive about our relationship. Some of us can't just bury ourselves in work and pretend everything's fine." That landed harder than I'd intended, and I saw him flinch. Rowan had been working extra hours lately, taking on more wedding photography gigs and doing some freelance metadata analysis work for law firms. His technical skills with digital forensics had become surprisingly lucrative, but it meant longer hours in his home office. "You're right," he said after a moment. "I have been distracted. Maybe some time apart would be good for both of us." "Perfect." I leaned over and kissed his forehead, breathing in the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with coffee. "I love you, Rowan. That's why I want to fix this before it gets worse." "How long were you thinking?" "Just the weekend. I'll drive up Friday morning and come back Sunday evening. Mum's been lonely since Dad passed anyway." Rowan nodded slowly. "Okay, but Lavinia, when you come back, I want us to really talk about everything, about what we both need to be happy." "Of course," I agreed, already mentally planning my actual weekend. The truth was, I hadn't spoken to my mother Eunice in 3 weeks, and she had no idea I was supposedly coming to visit. The truth was, I'd already booked a room at the Meridian Hotel downtown using our joint credit card, though I'd buried the charge among several other transactions. The truth was, I'd been chatting with Trent Avery, a bartender I'd met through my work at the Children's Future Foundation, for 6 weeks now. Trent was everything Rowan wasn't: spontaneous, flirtatious, dangerous in that way that made my stomach flutter when his name appeared on my phone. At 31, he had the kind of easy confidence that came from knowing he could charm anyone. He worked at the Meridian's rooftop bar, and when he'd suggested we spend a weekend together, the lie about visiting my mother had formed itself almost instantly. I spent Thursday evening carefully constructing my cover story. I texted my best friend Cressida Lane. "Covering for me this weekend if anyone asks, visiting Mom to work on marriage stuff. You know how it is." Cressida texted back immediately. Girl, are you sure about this? What if Rowan calls your mom? He won't, I replied. He's been so buried in work he barely knows what day it is. Besides, Mom never answers her phone anyway. I also sent strategic texts to Amy Tran and Leonie Field, two other close friends who formed our tight circle. Nothing too obvious, just mentions of needing space to think and working through some marriage issues. If anyone asked, they'd assume I was having a rough patch and needed family time. Friday morning, I packed a small suitcase with carefully chosen outfits. Nothing too obvious, but definitely not the kind of clothes I'd wear to sit around my mother's living room. I left Rowan a sweet note on his pillow. Thank you for understanding. I know we'll come back from this stronger. Love you always. L. The drive downtown took 45 minutes in Friday morning traffic, but I felt lighter with each mile. By the time I pulled into the Meridian's valet area, I was practically giddy with anticipation. Trent met me in the lobby, looking effortlessly handsome in dark jeans and a fitted button-down. His sandy brown hair was perfectly tousled, and when he smiled, I remembered why I'd been willing to risk everything for this weekend. Lavinia Quill, he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted just a beat too long. You look incredible. Thank you, I said, suddenly feeling beautiful in a way I hadn't in months. I can't believe we're actually doing this. Having second thoughts? Not even close. The hotel room was on the 15th floor with a view of the city skyline. Trent had arranged for champagne to be waiting, and as we toasted to our weekend of freedom, I felt like I was finally living again instead of just existing. That evening, we went to 3 different rooftop bars, taking photos and laughing like teenagers. I was careful to keep my wedding ring in my purse and to avoid posting anything on my main social media accounts. But I did update my carefully hidden dating profile, the one I'd created months ago, but never had the courage to use seriously. The photos I uploaded were perfect. Me laughing over cocktails, the city lights sparkling behind me, looking happier and more alive than I had in years. I made sure my location settings were off, and my profile was locked to only show to people outside my usual geographic area. What I didn't know was that all of my photos automatically backed up to the cloud storage account Rowan and I shared for family pictures. What I didn't know was that Rowan, with his forensic analysis background, had always been meticulous about digital organization and security. What I didn't know was that every photo I took that weekend was being geotagged and timestamped, creating a perfect digital trail of exactly where I was and when. As Trent and I collapsed into the hotel bed that night, laughing and breathless, I felt like I'd finally broken free from the suffocating routine of my marriage. I was Lavinia Quill again, not just Rowan's wife or Hazel's mother, but myself, desirable, exciting, alive. I fell asleep thinking about how refreshed and renewed I'd feel when I went home Sunday night, how this little adventure would make me a better wife because I'd gotten it out of my system. I had no idea that 200 miles away, Rowan was staring at his laptop screen at 2:17 a.m., looking at a cloud backup notification that showed new photos had been uploaded from my phone. Photos that were definitely not taken at my mother's house in the suburbs. Rowan had always been a light sleeper, a trait that served him well during late-night editing sessions, but poorly when his mind was racing with worry about his marriage. At 2:17 a.m. Saturday morning, he was still awake in his home office, trying to distract himself by organizing client files, when the notification popped up on his screen. New photos synced to Family Archive, Lavinia's iPhone. He almost ignored it. Lavinia was probably just taking pictures at her mother's house, maybe some nostalgic shots of her childhood bedroom, or the garden Eunice was so proud of. But something made him click on the notification. Maybe it was the photographer in him, always curious about images, or maybe it was the nagging feeling that had been growing in his chest since she'd left that morning. The first photo made him sit up straighter. It was Lavinia, but not the version of her he'd seen in months. She was laughing, her head thrown back, wearing a black dress he'd never seen before. The background showed a sophisticated rooftop setting with city lights, definitely not his mother-in-law's modest suburban home. His hands trembled slightly as he clicked through the other images. Lavinia at a bar, cocktail in hand, looking radiant. Lavinia posing with someone whose arm was visible in the frame, a man's arm in a dark shirt. Lavinia looking happier than she had during their entire last anniversary dinner. Rowan's forensic training kicked in automatically. He right-clicked on the first image and selected Properties, then navigated to the Details tab. The metadata was all there. GPS coordinates, timestamp, camera settings, even the specific device used. The coordinates placed her at the Meridian Hotel's rooftop bar at 9:43 p.m. Friday night, not at her mother's house, not even in the same city as her mother's house. He opened a mapping application and input the coordinates, though he already knew what he'd find. The Meridian was downtown, a boutique hotel known for its upscale bar scene and weekend party atmosphere. It was exactly the kind of place couples went for romantic getaways. Rowan sat back in his chair, his mind reeling. There had to be an explanation. Maybe Lavinia had met up with friends. Maybe her mother had come downtown for some reason. He was grasping for innocent explanations, but the forensic analyst in him was already seeing the pattern. He opened their shared credit card account online. There it was, buried among grocery purchases and gas station charges. Meridian Hotel, 347,050s, Thursday afternoon. A hotel room, not just drinks at the bar. His wife had lied to him. Not just a small lie, not just an omission, but an elaborate, premeditated deception. She'd looked him in the eye and told him she needed space to work on their marriage while secretly planning a weekend with another man. Rowan's first instinct was to call her, to confront her immediately. His phone was in his hand before he stopped himself. What would that accomplish? She'd just lie more, probably claim she could explain everything. She'd gaslight him, make him feel crazy for not trusting her. Instead, he opened a new folder on his desktop and labeled it Evidence. If his marriage was over, and the sick feeling in his stomach suggested it might be, he wasn't going to be caught unprepared. He started with the photos, saving each one individually and documenting the metadata. Then he moved to their financial records, taking screenshots of the hotel charge and cross-referencing it with other recent transactions. A charge at Victoria's Secret 2 weeks ago that he'd assumed was for her own comfort. Dinner at an expensive restaurant last month when she'd claimed to be working late at the foundation. The more he dug, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a spontaneous weekend fling. This had been planned, probably for weeks. Rowan worked methodically through the night, his photographer's eye for detail serving him well in this horrible new context. He found rideshare charges to downtown locations on days when Lavinia had claimed to be running errands. He found calendar entries that had been deleted from her shared calendar but were still visible in the sync cache. By 6 a.m., he had a timeline. By 8 a.m., he had a comprehensive digital trail that would make any forensic analyst proud. By 10 a.m., he was researching divorce attorneys. His phone buzzed with a text from Lavinia. "Good morning. Mum says hi, having coffee on her back porch and feeling so much better already. Love you." The casual cruelty of it hit him like a physical blow. She was lying to him in real time, probably from the hotel bed she was sharing with another man, and signing it with "Love you." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a screenshot of the text and added it to his evidence folder, noting the timestamp and cross-referencing it with the hotel's check-in records, which he'd managed to access through a contact in the hospitality industry who owed him a favor from a previous forensic job. Around noon, his mother Martha called to check in. "How are you holding up with Lavinia away?" she asked. "I know you two have been having a rough patch. Did she tell you that?" "She didn't have to, sweetheart. I've been married 40 years. I can see when a couple is struggling. I hope this time with Eunice helps her get her head on straight. Rowan almost told her the truth right then, but something held him back. Maybe it was the need to protect his mother from the ugliness of what was happening, or maybe it was the growing certainty that he needed to handle this carefully, strategically. I hope so too, Mom. Have you talked to Eunice at all? I was thinking of calling to thank her for taking such good care of our girl. Rowan's blood went cold. If his mother called Lavinia's mother, the whole lie would unravel immediately. I don't think that's necessary, Mom. You know how Eunice is about phone calls. True. Well, give Lavinia my love when you talk to her. After hanging up, Rowan realized he'd just become complicit in his wife's deception, lying to his own mother to protect a woman who was betraying him. The thought made him feel sick, but it also crystallized his resolve. He wouldn't be anyone's fool, not even temporarily. He spent the afternoon researching his options, reading about divorce proceedings and asset protection. His freelance work had been more lucrative than Lavinia knew. He'd been building a separate savings account to surprise her with a dream vacation for their 10th anniversary. Now that money would probably go toward attorney fees. That evening, Lavinia called while he was making dinner for one. "Hi, honey," she said, and he could hear laughter and music in the background. "Just wanted to check in before Mom and I settle in for a movie night." "What are you watching?" There was a brief pause. "Oh, you know Mom. She loves those old romantic comedies. Something with Meg Ryan, I think." "Sounds nice. How is she doing?" "Better. I think she's been lonelier than she lets on. This visit is good for both of us." Rowan closed his eyes, amazed at how easily the lies rolled off her tongue. "I'm glad. I love you, Lavinia." "I love you too. See you tomorrow night." After she hung up, Rowan sat in his quiet kitchen and ate reheated leftovers while his wife continued her affair 3 hours away. He thought about their daughter Hazel, who was spending the weekend at a friend's house, blissfully unaware that her family was disintegrating. He thought about the wedding photos he'd been editing, all those happy couples starting their lives together, trusting each other completely. He thought about the man whose arm had been visible in Lavinia's photos and wondered how long this had been going on. He thought about all the times he'd worked late in his office while his wife was upstairs, probably texting another man. He thought about how stupid he'd been, how naive. But mostly, he thought about justice. Lavinia thought she was smarter than him, thought she could manipulate him indefinitely. She had no idea that her husband's particular skill set made him uniquely qualified to document every aspect of her betrayal. She wanted to play games. Fine, but she was playing against someone who understood that in the digital age, everything left a trail. And Rowan Gable was very, very good at following trails. As he went to bed alone, in their king-size bed, Rowan was already planning his next moves. He wouldn't confront her immediately when she returned. He would wait, watch, and gather more evidence. He would let her think she'd gotten away with it while he built an airtight case. His wife thought she was the smart one in their marriage, the one who managed their social life and handled the complicated, emotional stuff, while he just took pictures and played with computers. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Sunday evening, I drove home with the windows down and music playing, feeling more alive than I had in months. The weekend with Trent had been everything I'd hoped for: spontaneous, passionate, liberating. We'd made no promises about the future, which was perfect. This wasn't about leaving Rowan. This was about remembering who I was underneath the layers of wife and mother and non-profit manager. I'd spent Sunday afternoon carefully constructing the story of my weekend at Mom's house, a walk around the old neighborhood, helping her organize Dad's remaining belongings, long talks about marriage and commitment. I'd even stopped at a grocery store near Mom's house to buy the specific brand of jam she always kept on hand, just in case Rowan noticed details. When I pulled into our driveway at 7:30 p.m., Rowan was waiting on the front porch with a glass of wine. He looked handsome in the golden evening light, and I felt a pang of affection for him that surprised me. Maybe this weekend away had been exactly what I needed to appreciate what I had at home. "Welcome back," he said, standing to hug me. His embrace felt different somehow, more careful, more deliberate. "How is your mum?" "Good. Really good, actually." I accepted the wine gratefully and settled into the porch swing beside him. "She sends her love, by the way. And this." I handed him the jar of jam. "She remembered how much you liked it at Christmas." Rowan examined the jar with what seemed like unusual interest. "That was thoughtful of her. How is she handling everything?" "Better than I expected. I think having company was good for her. We talked a lot about Dad, about their marriage, about what it takes to make a relationship last 40 years. And what conclusion did you reach?" There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully. His face was neutral, but his eyes had that focus quality they got when he was working on a particularly challenging photo edit. "That marriage is work, but it's worth it. That sometimes you need perspective to remember why you fell in love in the first place." I leaned against his shoulder. "I missed you, Rowan. I know I said I needed space, but I realized this weekend that what I actually needed was to remember how lucky I am." He sipped his wine thoughtfully. "Did you take any pictures while you were there?" The question seemed casual, but something about it made my stomach flutter with nervousness. "A few. Nothing special. You know how I am with photography. I leave that to the expert." "I'd love to see them sometime." "Of course." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the neighbors walk their dogs and water their gardens. This was nice, I thought. Peaceful. Maybe the weekend away had been exactly what we both needed. "Oh," I said, remembering. "Your mum called while I was at Mum's. I hope you don't mind, but I didn't answer. You know how she gets when she thinks there are problems between us." Rowan's hand stilled on his wineglass. "When did she call?" "Yesterday afternoon, I think. I was going to call her back today, but Mom and I got caught up in going through photo albums." "Right. Photo albums." There was definitely something odd about his responses, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Maybe he was just adjusting to having me back, or maybe he'd had his own revelations during our time apart. "Are you okay?" I asked. "You seem, I don't know, distant?" "Just processing, I guess. It's been a strange weekend." "Strange how?" Rowan looked at me for a long moment, and I had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing something I didn't want him to see. "Just quiet. Different. I did a lot of thinking, too." "Good thinking or bad thinking?" "Productive thinking." Before I could ask what that meant, Hazel burst through the front door, home from her sleepover with the Hendersons next door. "Mommy." She launched herself into my arms, all 7-year-old energy and enthusiasm. "Did you have fun at Grandma Eunice's? Did you bring me anything?" "I brought you this," I said, pulling a small snow globe from my purse. I'd bought it at a gift shop near the hotel, but it was generic enough to have come from anywhere. "Grandma thought you'd like it." Hazel shook the globe and watched the fake snow swirl around a miniature city skyline. "It's pretty. Can I call Grandma and thank her?" My heart stopped for just a moment. "She's probably asleep already, sweetheart. You know how early Grandma goes to bed. Maybe tomorrow." "Okay. Daddy, guess what? Mrs. Henderson taught me how to make pancakes that look like Mickey Mouse." As Hazel chattered about her weekend, I caught Rowan watching me again with that strange, analytical expression. When our eyes met, he smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Later, after Hazel was in bed, Rowan and I cleaned up the kitchen together. It felt almost normal, this domestic routine we'd performed thousands of times before. But there was an undercurrent of tension I couldn't shake. "So what did you do while I was gone?" I asked, loading the dishwasher. "Worked, mostly. Finished the Morrison wedding edit. Started on the Patterson anniversary shoot." He paused, wiping down the counter with unusual thoroughness. "Did some organizing in the office." "Organizing?" "Digital files, mostly. You know how cluttered the shared folders get. I cleaned up the cloud storage, made sure everything was properly backed up." Something cold settled in my stomach. That sounds boring. Actually, it was pretty interesting. Amazing what you can find when you really dig into the data. I forced a laugh. Spoken like a true computer nerd. Guilty as charged. Rowan folded the dishcloth with precise movements. Oh, I meant to ask. Did you use the joint card for anything while you were away? I was balancing the accounts and wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. The cold feeling spread through my chest. Just gas and maybe lunch somewhere. Nothing major. Right, I'll double-check the statements tomorrow. We finished cleaning in silence, and I found myself replaying the conversation, looking for hidden meanings in his words. But maybe I was just paranoid, guilty conscience making me see suspicion where there was only normal marital communication. In bed that night, Rowan made love to me with an intensity that surprised me. Afterward, as we lay in the dark, he traced patterns on my shoulder with his fingertip. I'm glad you're home, he said quietly. Me too. Lavinia? Whatever happens, I want you to know that I've always loved you, even when things got complicated. There was something final about the way he said it, something that made me turn to look at his face in the moonlight streaming through our bedroom window. Nothing's going to happen, I said. We're going to be fine. I hope so. But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted while I was away. Rowan felt different, not angry exactly, but distant in a way that had nothing to do with physical space. I told myself I was imagining things, that the guilt from my weekend was making me paranoid. Rowan was a good man, a trusting man. He loved me. He would never suspect that his wife was capable of the kind of deception I'd just pulled off. What I didn't know was that while I slept peacefully beside him, Rowan was staring at the ceiling, mentally reviewing the additional evidence he'd gathered during my absence. The rideshare receipts, the deleted calendar entries, the hotel charges that painted a perfect picture of my weekend activities. What I didn't know was that he'd already contacted 3 different divorce attorneys and had a consultation scheduled for Tuesday morning. What I didn't know was that my husband, gentle, trusting, naive Rowan, was planning the most methodical and devastating response to betrayal I could have imagined. I thought I'd gotten away with it. I thought I was smarter than him. I had never been more wrong about anything in my life. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal, except for the subtle ways everything had changed. Rowan was attentive but distant, present but guarded. He asked thoughtful questions about my day, brought me coffee in the morning, helped Hazel with her homework, all the motions of a devoted husband, but with an emotional remove that I couldn't quite identify. I threw myself into work at the Children's Future Foundation, organizing our annual gala and managing donor relationships with renewed energy. The weekend with Trent had awakened something in me, a sense of possibility and excitement that carried over into other areas of my life. I felt more confident, more attractive, more interesting. Trent and I texted sporadically, nothing too frequent or obvious, just enough to maintain the connection. He sent me photos from the hotel bar, little inside jokes about our weekend, suggestions for future meetings. I was careful to delete the messages immediately and never responded during times when Rowan might see my phone. But I was also careful not to seem too eager. This wasn't about leaving my marriage. It was about adding some excitement to it. The thrill of having a secret, of being desired by someone new, was making me a better wife to Rowan. I was more patient with his work schedule, more interested in his photography projects, more affectionate in bed. If he noticed the change, he didn't comment on it directly. But I caught him watching me sometimes with that analytical expression that made me slightly uncomfortable. 3 weeks after my visit with Mom, Rowan came home from a client meeting with an unusual request. I need to ask you something, he said, settling into the kitchen chair across from where I was reviewing gala seating charts. And I need you to be completely honest with me. My heart rate spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. Of course, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly, but I've been thinking about what you said about our marriage feeling stuck, and I realized you might be right. Maybe we do need to shake things up. Okay. I wasn't sure where this was going. I want to plan something special for our anniversary next month. Not just dinner and a hotel room, but something really memorable. A trip maybe, or a big party with all our friends. Relief flooded through me. This wasn't about suspicion. This was about romance. That sounds wonderful, Rowan. What did you have in mind? That's what I wanted to ask you about. I was thinking we could do a renewal of vows ceremony. Nothing huge, just our closest friends and family. Your mom could come down, we could have it at the botanical gardens, make it really beautiful. The idea should have thrilled me, but instead it filled me with a strange panic. A vow renewal felt like a trap somehow, like a public declaration that would make it harder to maintain my private life. That's a big gesture, I said carefully. Are you sure we need something that formal? I mean, we're already married. Rowan's eyes sharpened slightly. I thought you'd love the idea. You're always talking about how we don't celebrate things enough, how we let important moments pass without marking them properly. He was right, and my lukewarm response probably seemed strange. I forced enthusiasm into my voice. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry, I'm just surprised. It's such a thoughtful idea. So you want to do it? Yes, definitely. Let's plan something beautiful. Rowan smiled, but again, it didn't quite reach his eyes. Great. I'll start looking into venues and photographers. Maybe we could even hire a videographer to capture the whole thing. Why would we need a videographer? For posterity, so we can remember exactly what we promised each other, exactly how we felt in that moment. Something about the way he said it made me shiver, but I nodded agreement. That sounds perfect. Over the following days, Rowan threw himself into planning our vow renewal with an intensity that surprised me. He researched venues, interviewed photographers, even started writing new vows. He asked detailed questions about which friends I wanted to invite, which family members were essential, what kind of music would be meaningful to us. What about Cressida? He asked one evening as we worked through the guest list. She's been your closest friend for years. Of course, Cressida. And Amy and Leonie? Yes, definitely. They've been so supportive during our rough patch. I should probably thank them for being such good friends to you. I looked up from my laptop sharply. What do you mean? Just that it's nice to know you have people you can talk to when things get difficult. When you need advice, or just someone to listen. Right. Yes, they're wonderful friends. I'm sure they were happy to hear that we're working things out. I hadn't actually told Amy and Leonie about the vow renewal yet, mainly because I hadn't figured out how to frame it. They knew I'd been having marriage problems, but they also knew about my weekend with Trent. The cognitive dissonance was becoming harder to manage. I should probably call them this week, I said vaguely. Actually, why don't we have them over for dinner this weekend? We could tell them about the ceremony in person, maybe ask Amy to do a reading. She's always been so articulate. The suggestion filled me with dread, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. That's a nice idea, but this weekend is pretty busy with the gala prep. Next weekend, then. I feel like I haven't seen your friends in ages. There was something insistent about the way he was pushing this, something that made me feel cornered. But I couldn't think of a reasonable objection. Okay, I'll set something up. That night, I called Cressida to give her a heads up about the dinner party and the vow renewal. Wait, back up, she said. You're renewing your vows with Rowan, after the whole Trent situation. It's not a situation, I said, lowering my voice even though Rowan was in his office with the door closed. It was one weekend. It's over. Is it, though? Because you were texting me about him just last week. That doesn't mean anything. Look, the weekend away was exactly what I needed. It reminded me that I can still be exciting and desirable, and that's made me appreciate what I have with Rowan. Lavinia, that's not how this works. You can't have both. I'm not having both. I'm having my marriage. which is stronger now because I got that other thing out of my system. Cressida was quiet for a long moment. What if Rowan finds out? He won't. There's nothing to find out. It was one weekend, it's over, and now I'm recommitting to my marriage. It's actually kind of perfect. If you say so, but Lav, be careful. You're playing with fire and you have a lot to lose. After I hung up, I sat in our bedroom thinking about what Cressida had said. Was I playing with fire? Maybe. But I was also managing my life in a way that made everyone happier. Rowan was getting a more attentive wife, Hazel was getting more patient parents, and I was getting the excitement I needed to be satisfied with my domestic life. It was a balancing act, sure, but I was good at balancing acts. I'd been managing competing priorities and complex relationships my entire career. What I didn't realize was that while I was congratulating myself on my sophisticated approach to marriage, Rowan was in his office, printing out bank statements and hotel receipts. What I didn't realize was that he'd already spoken to 3 different attorneys and was building a case that would systematically dismantle every lie I'd told. What I didn't realize was that my husband's patience wasn't acceptance, it was strategy. And I was about to learn that Rowan Gable was much better at long-term planning than I'd ever given him credit for. The vow renewal wasn't going to be a celebration of our marriage. It was going to be a funeral for it. The dinner party was scheduled for Saturday night, and I spent the entire week dreading it. There was something about the way Rowan had insisted on hosting Amy and Lavinia that felt like a trap, though I couldn't articulate why. Maybe it was the way he'd been asking casual questions about my friendships, or the way he'd started paying attention to my phone habits. "Who are you texting?" he'd asked Thursday night when my phone buzzed during dinner. "Just Cressida about the gala seating arrangements," I'd replied, which was true, but his question had made me realize that I'd become hyper-aware of my phone around him, angling it away when I typed, keeping it face down on surfaces. Saturday afternoon, I cleaned the house obsessively while Rowan prepared an elaborate meal. He was making his grandmother's beef bourguignon, a dish that required hours of preparation and usually reserved for special occasions. "This seems like a lot of work for a casual dinner," I said, watching him carefully trim and season the meat. "I want to make a good impression. These are your closest friends, and I feel like I've been so buried in work lately that I haven't been the husband they think you deserve." The comment stung because it was probably true. Amy and Lavinia had listened to me complain about Rowan's work schedule and emotional distance for months. They'd been sympathetic when I'd described feeling lonely and unappreciated in my marriage. Of course, they'd also been supportive when I'd told them about my weekend with Trent, though I'd framed it as a moment of weakness rather than a calculated affair. "They love you, Rowan. They know you're a good husband." "Do they, though? I mean, you've been honest with them about our problems, right? About how neglectful I've been." There was something pointed about the question that made me look at him more carefully. He was focused on the cutting board, his knife moving with precise, methodical strokes. "I've told them we've been going through a rough patch, but I've never said you were neglectful." "What have you told them exactly?" "Just that we've been feeling disconnected. That marriage is hard work, normal stuff." Rowan nodded slowly. "And they've been supportive?" "Of course. That's what friends do." "Right, that's what friends do." Amy and Lavinia arrived at 7, bearing wine and flowers, and the kind of warm energy that had made them such important parts of my life. Amy Tran was a marketing director at a tech company, sharp and funny, and fiercely loyal. Leonie Field worked in public relations and had an intuitive understanding of social dynamics that made her an invaluable confidant. They hugged Rowan warmly and complimented the house, the meal, his recent photography work displayed on the walls. For the first hour, everything felt normal and comfortable. But as we moved through dinner, I began to notice that Rowan was steering the conversation in specific directions. "Lavinia tells me you two have been such good friends during our rough patch," he said as he served the main course. "It means a lot to know she has people to talk to when I'm not being the husband she needs." Amy and Leonie exchanged a quick glance. We all go through difficult periods, Amy said diplomatically. The important thing is working through them together. Absolutely. And I'm grateful that Lavinia felt comfortable enough to be honest with you about her feelings, about what she needed that she wasn't getting at home. Rowan, I said, feeling heat rise in my cheeks, we don't need to rehash all of that. I think it's healthy to acknowledge it, he replied calmly. I want Amy and Leonie to know that I'm aware of my shortcomings as a husband, that I understand why Lavinia might have felt unfulfilled. Leonie shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Every marriage has its challenges. True, but not every wife handles those challenges the same way. Some women might have just accepted the status quo, but Lavinia is more proactive. She takes action to get what she needs. The way he said it made my blood run cold. There was a subtext there that I couldn't quite grasp, but Amy and Leonie clearly sensed it too. Well, Amy said carefully, communication is always the best approach, talking through problems instead of letting them fester. Oh, Lavinia is excellent at communication, Rowan said, taking a sip of wine. She's very creative in how she expresses her needs, very resourceful in finding solutions. What's that supposed to mean? I asked, my voice sharper than I'd intended. Rowan looked at me with those photographer's eyes, seeing everything. Just that you don't let obstacles stop you from pursuing what you want, like when you decided to visit your mother a few weeks ago. You recognized that you needed space to think, and you made it happen. Amy nodded. Sometimes you need to step back to gain perspective. Exactly. And the weekend away was so good for her. She came back refreshed, renewed, ready to recommit to our marriage. Rowan's smile was pleasant, conversational. In fact, she was so inspired by the experience that we've decided to renew our vows next month. That's wonderful, Leonie exclaimed, and I could see her relief at the shift to positive news. It really is, Rowan agreed. After everything we've been through, all the secrets and lies and betrayals that couples accumulate over the years, it feels important to make a fresh start, to be completely honest with each other going forward. The word betrayals hung in the air like a threat. Amy and Leonie were both looking at me now, and I could see questions in their eyes. I think honesty is always the best policy, Amy said slowly. I couldn't agree more. In fact, I've been doing some soul-searching of my own since Lavinia's trip, really examining my behavior, looking at evidence of how I've failed as a husband. Rowan stood to clear plates, his movements casual and relaxed. It's amazing what you can discover when you really dig deep, when you look at the data objectively. My hands were trembling now, and I gripped my wine glass to steady them. Rowan, what are you talking about? Just that I've been doing a lot of research lately, about marriage, about trust, about what it takes to build a relationship on solid ground. He paused in the doorway to the kitchen. Did you know that most affairs leave digital footprints, GPS data, credit card records, photo metadata? It's fascinating how technology makes it almost impossible to keep secrets anymore. The room went completely silent. Amy and Leonie were staring at Rowan, then at me, understanding dawning on their faces. Rowan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll talk about all of this later. Right now, let's focus on our guests. He disappeared into the kitchen, leaving the three of us sitting in stunned silence. Amy was the first to speak. Lavinia, what is he talking about? I don't know, I lied, but my voice was shaking. He knows, Leonie said quietly. About Trent. He knows. He can't know. There's nothing to know. Stop lying, Amy said, her voice sharp with anger. To us and to yourself. What did you do? Before I could answer, Rowan returned with dessert and coffee, acting as if nothing had happened. So, he said brightly, let's talk about this vow renewal. I was hoping you two might help with the planning. Maybe even say a few words about what marriage means, what commitment looks like. Amy and Leonie barely touched their dessert, making polite conversation while shooting worried glances in my direction. They left as soon as it was socially acceptable, hugging me goodbye with the kind of careful distance that told me everything I needed to know about where their loyalties would lie when this all came crashing down. After they left, Rowan and I cleaned up in silence. Finally, as he loaded the last of the dishes into the dishwasher, I found my voice. "What was all that about tonight?" "What do you mean?" "The comments about betrayals and digital footprints and secrets. You were trying to scare me." Rowan turned to face me, and for the first time in weeks his mask slipped. The pain in his eyes was devastating. "I wasn't trying to scare you, Lavinia. I was giving you a chance to tell me the truth." "What truth?" "About where you really were 3 weeks ago, about who you were with, about the life you've been living behind my back." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. "I was at my mother's house." Rowan pulled out his phone and opened a folder. "These are the GPS coordinates from the photos you took that weekend. Would you like me to show you exactly where they place you?" I stared at the phone, at the evidence of my own stupidity, and felt my carefully constructed world begin to collapse around me. "Rowan, I can explain." "No," he said quietly, "you can't, because there is no explanation that makes this okay. There is no story that turns betrayal into love, lies into trust." He walked toward the stairs, then paused. "The vow renewal is off, obviously, but don't worry about telling people. I'll handle the explanations." As his footsteps disappeared up the stairs, I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of what had been meant to be a celebration, and realized that my marriage was over. The only question now was how much else I was going to lose in the process.